and welcome to today's presentation. I'm Steve Kenny, the Architecture and Engineering Manager for EMEA for Access Communications. So today's presentation, I'm going to be focusing on the concept of cyber-physical security, which I guess in principle might be a new term to a lot of the audience today. But it's really to focus on the cybersecurity considerations for physical security technologies, and essentially why that's really important for the decision-making process when businesses are evaluating the type of technologies that we're looking to procure to essentially secure the environments that we're working in. So a quick agenda, I will run through sort of why cyber-physical security is so important. I'll give you some examples in regards to acknowledging the associated risk, and I'll highlight some of the examples where physical security technologies have really been targeted by attackers, and the pain that that's caused organizations that have suffered from those attacks. And then lastly, I'll touch base loosely on some of the supply chain due diligence areas. So that's really how you can start to evaluate the technology partners that you're looking to work with in regards to securing the environments that you'll be supporting with your end customers. So I guess really stripping it back and focusing on why is cyber physical security so important? Well, essentially the Allianz Risk Barometer 2022 report was published earlier on this year, and they had just over 2,500 corporate organizations from 89 different countries reply, and the number one threat that was identified was cybersecurity. And through the evaluation process, they also looked at business continuity, second, natural disasters, climate change, and even the pandemic. So when we consider who we are there to support, we are there to support and provide security for physical security organizations or those stakeholders within a business. So ultimately, the end customer is focused on the importance of cybersecurity to their business. And when we consider how big a risk this is to organizations, we've seen that the rise of cyber attacks in cost increasing from around $450 billion back in 2016 up to around $6 trillion last year. And it's been forecast that the ongoing cyber attacks will cost the global economy around $10.5 trillion by 2025. So if we give that some perspective, $10.5 trillion would be the third largest economy globally behind the US and China. And if we look at the GDP of the US, that's around 21.5 trillion. So cyber attacks globally will cost almost 50% of the GDP of the US. So this is a threat to businesses that will continue to increase. And it is no wonder that organizations are taking this so seriously. And when we consider why businesses are focusing so heavily on cybersecurity, and when we look at physical security, essentially the threat landscape has changed. The attack vector has fundamentally changed. So now businesses are looking at the impact of IT security. And whether we like it or not, physical security technologies today are IT technologies that sit on the corporate infrastructure, but they provide physical security. So we need to acknowledge that we have to align physical security technologies to IT policies to make sure that these technologies that have been provided to secure these environments are not the assets that are attacked and cause the greatest threat to a business. It would be a catastrophic disaster if the very product that were there and installed to provide security with a bigger security risk. So let's just consider why that's so important. And when we look at the ramifications of an attack, there's lots and lots of different reasons that an organization will be targeted, but there's lots of ways that we see that this is causing a lot of trouble for organizations. So whether or not that is operational disruption, so the way that a business operation is stopped, so we've got distributed denial of services, We have organisations being targeted specifically for their intellectual property. Reputational damage is a huge impact if an organisation is attacked, especially for organisations that have got big consumer databases, and the loss of that data. Just think of the impact that it will have on a share price if an organisation is attacked. When we think around what happened back in 2015 with TalkTalk, that had a massive cost impact on their share price. And then finally, we need to consider fines and some of the legal implications that we see. So we've seen organisations that have been fined under general data protection regulation where an organisation has essentially been attacked. So they were the victim and they have subsequently been fined because they haven't been able to demonstrate how they have been protecting their customers' data. So not only were they the victim of an attack, but they've also been fined by the authorities under a GDPR non-compliance. So there's lots of different areas and different ways that we see businesses being targeted. Then we look at the actual physical security system. So what does that mean to an organization? So if a system is attacked, does it override the physical security system? Are access control systems compromised? So we need to start thinking around whether or not a system attacker can actually start to open and close the access points to a building, if they can access the video surveillance systems. And if they can access the video surveillance systems, does that compromise the integrity of the data or the video system that is being collected? And let's not forget the impact that we've seen over the last 2 years in regards to the pandemic and how that has fundamentally changed the way some businesses operate. So I guess where we are today, we're starting to see a lot of businesses invite people back into their offices. But for 2 years, we've had a number of vacant properties. We've no longer had people on sites. Given that situational awareness of being the eyes and providing on-site security just from the presence of individuals, naturally, organisations have had to send everybody home. And what has that meant in regards to how they secure access to the data in their data centres or even the servers on site? Naturally, they've given remote access to their employees and have they had the VPN capabilities? And I guess a lot of organisations haven't. We've started to see organisations dynamically change the way they use their security systems and whether or not we open that up to remote monitoring sites, whether or not we open that up to new business initiatives, new marketing teams. So the technologies are used in lots and lots of different ways. And by opening up the technologies, we actually bring in risk. And then the final one is we've really created or we've empowered our employees. We've given them a greater level of responsibility in order to provide the security of our own sites. And naturally, we find that a lot of people that have been working on these and working from home, people have been working on their kitchen worktops, they've got children running around, their security awareness has dropped massively just because of the huge number of distractions from working at home. And phishing emails have gone on the increase. And the big consequence to that is we've seen the huge numbers in regards to cyber attacks faced by businesses, whether that be through social engineering, through phishing attacks, ransomware. And that is largely down to people just not investing the same level of security that they would when they were on-prem or in an office, because essentially they're protected by the environment in which they're working from. And that's not always been the case from home, unfortunately. Then when we consider, again, how we're starting to see businesses operate, and I've highlighted where we're starting to see businesses using artificial intelligence and analytics. And essentially, this has really helped in improving the accuracy of the security systems, which is great. And we're moving from I'd say a forensic to a real-time. So we want real-time data. And in order to get real-time data, we need to connect to lots of different systems and we need to push data around networks. So lots of different stakeholders can act on that quickly and efficiently. And one area we are seeing is business optimization, where businesses are using video surveillance systems, access control systems to collect data to make them run more efficiently. So it's no longer just a security system. It's a security system that provides intelligent data to support business efficiencies, which is absolutely fantastic. But when we consider These systems are no longer closed circuit television systems. They are no longer sat on their own independent networks, and they're no longer segregated from other systems. They are now connected to and working with lots and lots of different systems across a network. But then whose responsibility is it to make sure that all of these systems are secure? And that's where we see the importance of the engagement with IT departments. And what we are starting to see is now we are connecting lots and lots of different systems to lots of different areas of business. Businesses are changing the way they're evaluating the actual system architecture. So traditionally, an organization may have focused on a network security design where they make the assumption that anything that is within their network is secure, which isn't always true. And in a very positive way, we see organizations taking a zero trust security model where they take a greater level of focus towards the actual device and the device technology to make sure that that is secure and is fit for purpose. So when we consider that, the video surveillance and access control technologies, that is really, really important, because no longer are these technologies protected by the physical walls of a building. These technologies are at the most exposed areas of a building. These are external, and those external connections give connectivity potentially to a corporate network. So it's really important that those technologies and those devices are secure and demonstrate best practice, and the organizations selling these technologies can show their cyber maturity. And one thing people need to be mindful of is you are only as strong as your weakest link. So if you consider that at any point within the supply chain, if there is a weak link in there, it could be targeted. And it won't necessarily be targeted by a human being or a targeted attack. It may be targeted by a bot. So it might be fully automated with attackers just phishing the internet, just looking out for vulnerabilities. And some examples of these where we've seen video surveillance systems hacked, and this is a school system in the Northwest. A number of school systems were attacked. And essentially this was a poorly designed and poorly configured CCTV system. And naturally this created a huge amount of press space, and it also got a lot of coverage because people send their children to school with an expectation of that's where they'll be safe. And I would contest whether or not hacked is the right word for these systems, because these systems weren't hacked, and they were making themselves publicly available. They had a default username and password that hadn't been changed. There was no level of encryption. They had remote access enabled, so they're making themselves publicly available. So essentially this was poor out-of-box configuration. And this created change in the UK, because the UK now has the Surveillance Camera Commission's Secure by Design, Secure by Default certification that video surveillance technology providers must comply with. So that's a really important change that has happened that businesses need to understand. A good bad example of a system that has been hacked was a casino in Australia. And naturally, I don't think anyone loses any sleep when a casino loses, because obviously they tend to win. But in this instance, the video streams were hacked of the surveillance system, and essentially enabled the hackers to relay who was playing what hands on the casino floor. And naturally, when you know what the others are playing, you are going to win all of the time. And it was only the following day that they were evaluating the takings of the business. This casino had realized that they'd lost $32 million. And this has been classed as the real life Ocean's 11. So again, a video surveillance system that is hacked and had negative consequences. One that hit the international press was where a video surveillance as a service, so the actual vendor was targeted. So this is the technology provider. And when we consider the huge number of supply chain attacks that we're seeing across the industry at the moment, this is where your technology partners need to take responsibility for either the system integrator security or the end customer's security. And essentially, the hackers were able to hack 150,000 cameras. They got admin privileges, which essentially not only did it compromise the security of the sites, but the hackers were able to identify and access archived video and archived audio. So they were able to replay video in police custody suites and hear the recordings for those in the US. And we also saw within this example where they were able to access the corporate networks as well. So when we consider if somebody had the keys to your house and could look around your house, they would eventually find your jewelry box with all the important things that you kept secure. And that is exactly the same when someone can access your corporate network. Given enough time, they will find the information that they want to find, whether that be customer data, whether it be intellectual property. And this was all down to an attack through the technology partner. And there are huge examples of supply chain attacks, not just in the video surveillance or the security market. We've seen it in the HVAC market. So any IoT device is a threat to an organization. And one is around data integrity. And this is one where Forbes have actually commented on this. And they say that this could be the greatest threat to the surveillance industry. And this is around people being able to access corporate video, which we've just seen in the previous example, where people have been able to create deep fakes. Now, there's lots of researchers out there that have demonstrated that this has been done. Whether or not we've actually seen any live instances where deep fakes have been created on hacked systems is another question. But it's around the integrity of the video. So if an organization can't demonstrate that someone hasn't tampered with that video, does that video maintain any credibility if it was going to be used in a court or as evidence? So that's one question. Whether or not the video is signed video, so organizations can demonstrate that that video hasn't been manipulated, is another question. And one question that we often get asked within the technology side of the industry is, well, what's the worst that can happen? And two examples that we often hear is, well, someone can access my video feed, big deal. Okay, we've seen in other instances where accessing the video feed could be a non-compliance to GDPR. And then we've seen people say, well, they could potentially try and access my corporate network. But the reality is I've got firewalls in place and I've got security measures there to prevent that from happening, which is absolutely fine. Organizations, if they're correctly set up, that's potentially there. But what people need to think is they need to think of the bigger picture. Those considerations are when they are thinking of themselves individually or they are thinking of their business individually. They're not thinking of the potential implications of an attack on a greater scale. And an example of that, and one that hit home pretty hard with the video surveillance market, was one that we've seen in regards to a large distributed denial of service. And essentially the UK's National Crime Agency investigated an attack where they took a whole nation offline, where they were able to identify tens of thousands of video surveillance cameras that were publicly available online. They had known vulnerabilities and they were able to redirect that traffic towards different telecoms providers. And naturally, when systems haven't been designed to accommodate video, the data packets are so great in comparison to normal data packet sizes that it just crashed the network. So just think of the implications of what that has when you take an entire nation offline, not the tens of thousands or millions of dollars worth of costs. But we wouldn't be doing events like this today if these systems had been taken offline. And businesses rely on these systems, whether it be healthcare, education, banking and finance, telecoms, they all rely on connectivity. So that is the bigger picture. It is the implications of badly designed systems impacting other stakeholders outside of your immediate circle. So I often challenge people, they need to reconsider the procurement strategy. We've always started with how much does it cost, and then we backward engineer what we need to consider. So I would ask, just think around doing your due diligence on the organization that is supplying the technologies or doing the installations. Once you are comfortable with that organization, look at their security policies, then evaluate the technology to make sure it will deliver against your operational requirements, and then look at budgeting purposes. So the key areas for due diligence are focus on business policies and processes. The UK has something called the Cyber Essentials Plus, which is how an organization will demonstrate their own maturity, what they are doing to protect themselves, likewise with building security and maturity model. We have technology features, so focus on technology features, examples, TPM modules, the processing chips that they're providing. Does the technology provider actually manufacture the technologies themselves? And finally, how are they going to support that technology moving forward? So focus on vulnerability management. How are they going to support firmware updates? All questions that if a manufacturer can't answer, they're probably not the right manufacturer to be engaged with. So my final slide is make cybersecurity one of the key considerations when purchasing physical security systems. Do not allow that physical security system to be the biggest risk to the organization that is looking to install it. I hope that you found today's presentation educational and enjoyable. I welcome any questions. Thank you very much.